All right, let's jump right into this explainer. You know, when you hear the name Anarkali, your mind probably shoots straight to one of the most famous tragic romances in history, right? A handsome prince, a stunning courtesan, a strictly forbidden love, and of course, a deeply cruel emperor. But what if I told you that just beneath the surface of Syed Imtiaz Ali Taj's classic 1922 Urdu play, there's actually a profound, incredibly tense philosophical debate going on? We're going to look at this story today not just as a tragedy of the heart, but as a really deep exploration of justice, personal liberty, and the absolute unchecked authority of the state.
Here's the roadmap for what we'll cover today. Beyond a tragic romance, the clash of two rights, liberty versus political obligation, defining true justice, and finally, the dictator's verdict.
Section 1. Beyond a tragic romance, the surface story.
So to set the stage, we are in the majestic court of the Mughal Emperor Akbar. His son, Prince Salim, has fallen completely head over heels for a courtesan named Nadera, who's been given the title Anarkali. Now, the inciting incident here happens incredibly fast. Day 1, morning, they're setting up for the massive Nowruz festival. By evening, a violently jealous slave girl named Dilaram sets a trap. She spikes Anarkali's water with wine right before major royal performance. That night, intoxicated and completely losing her royal self-restraint, Anarkali sings this bold song of open love, locking eyes exclusively with Prince Salim and literally ignoring the emperor. The result? By day 2, an infuriated Emperor Akbar orders her thrown into prison. Just like that, in less than 24 hours, a private little romance transforms into a direct, existential threat to the entire political order.
Now, while we're usually just swept up in the romance of it all, zooming out really shows us that this play is actually a super strict interrogation of social hierarchy. It exemplifies the rigid determination of boundaries based on age, gender, and rank. You see, the state, led by Akbar, dictates that human emotions must have strict boundaries. And transgressing those boundaries isn't just considered rude, it invites this massive, violent revulsion from the state itself.
Section 2. The clash of two rights. State versus individual.
Now, what's really interesting here is the actual dialectical conflict. True tragedy isn't really a simple battle between good and evil. It's a deadly clash between two equally valid rights. On the left side of this conflict, we've got Emperor Akbar. It's so easy to just write him off as an overbearing villain. But historically, Akbar actually represents rationality and conscious lawmaking. He stands for political order and state survival above all else. In a weird way, enforcing the law equally, even against your own son, is highly progressive. But then, on the right side, you have Salim and Anarkali. They represent the inner conscience, individual liberty, and this universal law of love that they truly believe sits way higher than any man-made laws.
And when these two massive forces collide, the emotional rupture is just absolute. Listen to this devastating rebuke from Prince Salim to his father. He says, "You're a murderer who got Anarkali killed. Your breath stinks like the smell of corpses." Wow. He strips Akbar of his fatherly title entirely, reducing him to just a bloodshedder. That is not just an angry young man yelling at his dad. That is the literal sound of an individual conscience violently rejecting the authority of the state.
Moving on to Section 3, Liberty versus Political Obligation, the philosophical tug-of-war.
This brings us to the core philosophical conflict. The political theorist Judith N. Shklar asks this brilliant, penetrating question. Why should we obey or disobey the government when law and private conscience are in conflict? It's a huge question. We're supposedly duty-bound to follow social norms because society completely relies on them, right? But when Anarkali acts on her inner truth, she forces us to ask whether we should just blindly assume the ruler's given laws are always right.
Think about Rousseau's ideas on social organization for a second. Yes, the state absolutely requires a shared political space with fundamental ideals, and it has to promote devotion to those principles. But here is the major catch. For a critical political culture to actually survive, it must defend freedom of expression. Dissenting voices aren't a bug in the system, they're a crucial feature. They keep concepts liberal and humane. Akbar's fatal flaw here is that he leaves literally zero room for subversion. By totally failing to negotiate with Anarkali's nonconformity, he reveals a coercive, dictatorial reality that's just masquerading as political order.
Section 4. Defining true justice. Niti versus Nyaya.
So the crucial point here is understanding the distinction between two classical Sanskrit terms for justice. First up is niti. Niti is all about organizational propriety and behavioral correctness. It's the strict, by-the-book institutional rules of a society. This aligns perfectly with Emperor Akbar. For him, Niti is the whole shebang. The rule was broken, therefore the punishment must be administered, simple as that. But then we have Nyaya. And Nyaya is a much more comprehensive concept of realized justice. It's inescapably linked with the actual world that emerges, way beyond mere rules on a page. The economist Amartya Sen argues that no matter how proper your institutions are, if your rules end up resulting in arbitrary violence, you are completely violating human justice. Nyaya demands we look at the actual human outcomes. We can actually expand on this by looking at Islamic jurisprudence, which, ironically enough, was the exact framework of Akbar's own empire. This law emphasizes three main forms of justice: justice to God, known as Tawheed, justice to others based on equity and equality, or Qist, and justice to self by building an accountable character, which is Adli. Crucially, the Quran explicitly forbids hatred in the dispensation of justice. Yet, Akbar's actions are just bloated with power, pride, and egotistic revenge. He completely violates the very principles of equity he's supposed to be upholding.
Section 5. The Dictator's Verdict. The Outcome of Conflict.
Let's analyze the terrifying climax of this play. Back in the 16th century, the Holy Roman Emperor Ferdinand I had a famous motto, Fiat Justitia et Pereat Mundus, which translates to, "Let justice be done though the world perishes." This is exactly Akbar's mindset. It's what philosophers sometimes call the justice of fish, a tyrannical, predatory approach where a ruler's personal dislike and totalitarian obsession with order leads them to literally destroy their own family. And so, Akbar, completely unmoved, orders Anarkali to be entombed alive in a brick wall. This totally exposes the horrific disproportion of Akbar's so-called justice. Just look at the breakdown of this action. The crime? Loving a prince. The result? Entombed alive. The actual threat to the state? Absolutely none. They didn't incite a rebellion, they didn't threaten the kingdom's law and order in any real way. The philosopher John Rawls argues that any just social arrangement has to prioritize liberty, letting people pursue their own moral interests. By crushing them just because he didn't like their love, Akbar proves he's running a dictatorship, not a just society.
Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. The true tragedy of Anarkali isn't really just that two young lovers were violently torn apart. The much bigger tragedy is the state's total inability to reconcile human emotion and individual liberty with the need for political order. So I want you to think about our world today. How do modern societies navigate this exact same tension between individual will and dictatorial state authority? When our personal conscience clashes with the law, how do we ensure that our pursuit of order doesn't completely destroy our humanity? I'll leave you to ponder that. Thanks for joining me today.